Nathan Rhodes stared at the holographic contract floating before him, its alien script shifting and reformatting into standard English. The translation was courtesy of his neural implant, a mandatory installation for all human employees at the Nexian Advanced Research Station. He'd already signed his name on 3 different sections, each covering various aspects of his new position as lead software architecture engineer. Just one final addendum, chirped the HR representative, a willowy being with iridescent skin who had introduced herself as Liaison Prel. It's our standard genetic compatibility registration, merely a formality for all staff members. Nathan nodded absently, his attention focused on debugging a particularly tricky quantum encryption algorithm in his head. The sooner he finished this paperwork, the sooner he could start his real work. His fingertip glowed as he pressed it to the floating document. Excellent, Prell's skin rippled with pleased patterns. Your orientation package will be delivered to your quarters. Director Tesseria will meet with you tomorrow at 900 station time to begin your integration process. Something about her tone finally penetrated Nathan's preoccupation. Integration process? I thought orientation was just a series of virtual modules. Oh, the modules are just preliminary preparation. The Nexians believe in a more hands-on approach to cultural exchange. Prell's skin flickered with what might have been amusement. Do get some rest, tomorrow will be quite eventful. Before Nathan could press for details, she had glided away, leaving him alone in the pristine white reception area. He shrugged off his unease. After 6 months of rigorous applications and background checks, he'd finally landed his dream job. The Nexians were the acknowledged leaders in quantum computing and artificial consciousness development. Working here would put him years ahead of his earthbound colleagues. The station's AI guided him through gleaming corridors to his assigned quarters. The apartment was surprisingly spacious, with sweeping views of the gas giant the station orbited. Its swirling purple storms cast an ethereal light through the polarized windows. A package waited on his bed, the orientation materials presumably. Inside he found several items of clothing in a silky material he didn't recognize, along with a small device labeled Cultural Protocols Guide. He activated it, and a holographic index sprang to life. Welcome to the Nexian Species Preservation Initiative, a pleasant voice began. As a genetically compatible participant, you have been selected to contribute to the advancement and diversity of Nexian society. Please review the following ceremonies and protocols. Nathan's blood ran cold as he quickly scanned through the contents. Genetic sampling, compatibility trials, bonding ceremonies. This wasn't an orientation manual, it was a breeding program handbook. He frantically pulled up his contract on his neural display, this time paying attention to the fine print he'd skimmed earlier. There it was, buried in subsection 47B. Participant agrees to full participation in all aspects of the initiative, including but not limited to genetic contribution, pair bonding ceremonies, and resulting familial obligations. This has to be a mistake, he muttered, packing the room. I'm a software engineer, not a genetic donor. His comm unit chimed with an incoming message. Greetings, Nathan Rhodes. I look forward to evaluating your potential contribution to our genetic library tomorrow. Your profile suggests promising compatibility markers. Rest well. Director Tesseria. Attached was an image of his supposed evaluator, a tall, elegant Nexian woman with striking crystalline features and eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. She wore the complex ceremonial robes of a high-ranking scientist, but something about her expression suggested she found humor in the situation. Nathan collapsed onto his bed, mind racing. He could try to back out of the contract, but that would mean giving up the career opportunity of a lifetime. Maybe he could find some loophole, some way to participate in the initiative without actually participating. His comm chimed again. P.S. Do not concern yourself with seeking contract exemptions. I have already reviewed all 2,347 possible legal precedents. I look forward to discussing alternative perspectives on the situation tomorrow. Great, she was thorough and telepathic, or just very good at predicting human reactions. Neither option was particularly comforting. The station's artificial day cycle began to dim, simulating evening. Nathan lay back, staring at the gas giant's storms through his window. He'd wanted to be on the cutting edge of science, to push the boundaries of what was possible. He just hadn't expected those boundaries to include his own genetic material. Still, something about Director Tesseria's message intrigued him. She hadn't seemed threatening or coldly scientific. If anything, she appeared to be amused, interested, and what did she mean by alternative perspectives? As he drifted off to sleep, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The Nexians were renowned for their logical, methodical approach to everything. There had to be more to this situation than simple biological necessity. His last conscious thought was that tomorrow would either be the most awkward day of his life or the beginning of something far more interesting than he'd bargained for. Possibly both. The gas giant storms continued their eternal dance outside his window, indifferent to the small human's predicament. Somewhere else in the station, Director Tesseria reviewed his complete file one more time, her crystalline features catching the same purple light as she allowed herself a small smile. Humans were so wonderfully unpredictable. This particular one showed more promise than most, if only he could see past his own cultural assumptions. Tomorrow would indeed be interesting. At precisely 900 station time, Nathan's door chimed. He'd spent the morning alternating between nervous packing and attempting to look professional while wearing the provided ceremonial garments, which seemed to shift colors based on his anxiety levels. Enter, he called, trying to keep his voice steady. Director Tesseria glided into the room with an otherworldly grace that made Nathan acutely aware of his own awkward posture. In person, she was even more striking than her holographic message had suggested. Her crystalline features caught the light like faceted diamonds, and her ceremonial robes seemed to contain entire nebulae in their shifting patterns. Nathan Rhodes, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that his neural implant couldn't quite translate. I trust you had sufficient time to review the protocols. About that, Nathan started, then paused as she raised what might have been an eyebrow. It was hard to tell with Nexian facial features. I mean, yes, I reviewed them, but there seems to be a misunderstanding. I came here to work on quantum computing architecture, not to participate in genetic research. Tesseria's features shifted in what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. And you believe these objectives are mutually exclusive? Fascinating. Please explain your reasoning. Well, Nathan faltered. He hadn't expected to be asked to defend his position quite so directly. It's just that on Earth, we generally keep our professional and personal lives separate, especially when it comes to genetic contributions. Ah, yes, your species' curious compartmentalization of existence. Tesseria moved to the window, studying the gas giant outside. Tell me, Nathan, when you develop a quantum algorithm, do you not pour your entire being into its creation? Does it not carry your unique signature, your particular way of seeing the universe? Well, yes, but that's different. Is it? She turned back to him, her crystalline eyes seeming to see straight through his carefully constructed arguments. You humans create with your minds, and we Nexians believe that creation, all creation, is inherently interconnected. Your genetic patterns and your cognitive patterns are equally valuable expressions of your unique perspective on reality. Nathan blinked. Put that way, it almost made sense, almost, but the contract was completely transparent about our holistic approach to scientific advancement. Tesseria's skin rippled with what might have been suppressed laughter. Though I admit, we may have miscalculated human tendencies to skim lengthy documents. So, what exactly are you expecting from me? Nathan asked, relaxing slightly despite himself. Something about her manner was putting him at ease, even as her words challenged his preconceptions. Initially, conversation, collaboration, the chance to understand how your mind works. She gestured to a seating area that Nathan could have sworn wasn't there a moment ago. The genetic compatibility evaluation is merely one data point in a much larger equation. As they sat, a holographic display materialized between them, showing complex patterns that Nathan recognized as both genetic sequences and quantum algorithms, intricately intertwined. You see, Tesseria continued, we believe that true innovation comes from the unexpected combinations of different ways of thinking. Your species has a remarkable capacity for lateral thinking, for making intuitive leaps that our more structured approach often misses. And this has something to do with genetics because everything is connected, Nathan. The way you approach a problem, the way you see patterns, the way you imagine new possibilities, it's all encoded in your being, both mental and physical. She manipulated the hologram, showing him how the patterns aligned. We're not just looking for genetic diversity, we're looking for cognitive diversity, for new ways of seeing the universe. Nathan found himself drawn into the discussion despite his initial reservations. The patterns she was showing him were fascinating, suggesting connections between quantum states and biological systems that he'd never considered. But why the ceremonies, the formal protocols? He asked, genuinely curious now. Tessaria's features arranged themselves into what he was pretty sure was a smile. Perhaps another human trait we find valuable, you make everything into a story. Ceremonies give meaning to actions, create context for understanding. Would you prefer we simply treated this as a sterile laboratory procedure? Put that way, the answer was obvious. No, I suppose not, but I still have concerns about the practical implications, the long-term commitments, Tesseria finished for him. Of course you do, that's exactly why you're interesting to us. You question, you challenge, you seek to understand. These are valuable traits. She stood, her robes swirling with cosmic patterns. I propose an experiment. Work with me on your quantum computing projects. Let me show you how we see the connections between all things. If after a standard station cycle, you still wish to maintain your species' arbitrary divisions between professional and personal creation, we can renegotiate your contract. And if I don't, then perhaps you'll discover that what you thought was a clerical error was actually the universe's way of showing you a new perspective on integration theory, in all its forms. Nathan couldn't help but laugh. Did you just make a quantum computing joke? Did I? Tessaria's features shifted in what was definitely amusement now. How wonderfully unexpected. Shall we begin our first collaborative session? I believe you have some fascinating ideas about nonlinear quantum state optimization. As they began discussing his work, Nathan realized she had neatly sidestepped any firm commitments while simultaneously making him genuinely curious about Nexian perspectives on, well, everything. It was either brilliant negotiation or genuine intellectual interest. Possibly both. You're doing it again, he said suddenly. Doing what? Finding elegant solutions to complex problems by reframing the initial conditions. Am I? Tesseria manipulated the hologram to show a particularly intricate pattern. How wonderfully unexpected. Perhaps we should add that observation to our dataset on cross-cultural problem-solving approaches. Nathan shook his head, smiling despite himself. He had a feeling his time on the station was going to be far more educational than he'd initially planned, in ways that no contract could have possibly described. Outside the window, the gas giant storms continued their dance, a reminder that the universe had its own way of bringing order to chaos and chaos to order, much like the conversation happening in its purple light. 3 weeks into his stay on the station, Nathan found himself doing something he'd never expected, voluntarily attending a Nexian cultural ceremony. He'd grown fascinated by their intricate rituals, particularly how they wove scientific principles into every aspect of their lives. You're holding your resonance crystal upside down, Tesseria whispered, her harmonics carrying an undertone of amusement. They stood in the station's ceremonial chamber, where weekly pattern recognition gatherings were held. There's an upside down, Nathan muttered back, quickly flipping the crystal. It's a perfect geometric shape. The quantum alignment matters more than the physical geometry, she explained, her own crystal humming in perfect harmony with the chamber's ambient frequency. Feel the vibration pattern. Nathan closed his eyes, focusing on the subtle variations in the crystal's resonance. After weeks of working with Tesseria, he'd begun to develop a sensitivity to the quantum-level interactions the Nexians took for granted. It's like a code, but not binary, more like a quantum superposition of multiple states. Yes, Tesseria finished. Very good. Most humans take months to perceive the basic patterns. Before Nathan could respond, a ripple of tension passed through the assembled Nexians. He opened his eyes to see Senior Administrator Gerald entering the chamber, his crystalline features set in rigid patterns that even Nathan could recognize as disapproval. Director Tesseria, Gerald's voice carried harmonics that made Nathan's teeth ache. The advisory board requests your immediate presence. Alone. Tesseria's features remained perfectly composed, but Nathan felt her crystal's resonance shift slightly. Of course, Administrator. Nathan, please continue with the ceremony. Remember what I showed you about the third harmonic progression. As she glided away with Gerald, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The other Nexians in the chamber had drawn slightly away from him, their crystals humming in discordant patterns. He lasted another 10 minutes before making an excuse and slipping out. His neural implant had mapped enough of the station's layout that he could find his way to the advisory board chamber, though he'd never had reason to visit it before. The massive doors were closed, but Nathan's enhanced hearing caught fragments of the conversation within. An unprecedented breach of protocol, Gerald's voice. Results speak for themselves, Tesseria sounding calmer than Nathan expected. The human's quantum sensitivity readings are irrelevant, a third voice cut in. The Preservation Initiative has strict guidelines. Guidelines based on outdated assumptions, Tesseria countered. Nathan's approach to nonlinear quantum states has already improved our processing efficiency by 17%. His genetic profile is exactly why our traditional methods need revision, Tesseria interrupted. We sought diversity, yet we enforce rigid conformity in how we approach it. Nathan leaned closer to the door, fascinated despite his guilt at eavesdropping. He'd known there was resistance to Tesseria's methods, but hadn't realized how serious it was. The initiative exists to preserve and enhance our species, Gerald stated flatly, not to revolutionize our entire approach to genetic science. Perhaps it should do both. Tesseria's harmonics carried a challenge. Nathan has demonstrated that cognitive evolution can precede genetic integration. His understanding of our quantum patterns grows daily without any physical modification. That is precisely our concern, the third voice said. You've allowed him to access restricted knowledge without following proper protocols. He hasn't even completed the preliminary bonding ceremony. Because he's learning more effectively without it, Tesseria replied. His natural resistance to formal structure forces us to explain concepts we've taken for granted. In teaching him, we're discovering gaps in our own understanding. Nathan heard movement approaching the door and quickly retreated around a corner. Gerald emerged first, his crystalline features radiating disapproval. Tesseria followed more slowly, her usual grace somewhat diminished. Once the others had gone, Nathan stepped out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause problems. Tesseria's features shifted to surprise, then understanding. Of course you followed me, another wonderfully unpredictable human trait. She gestured for him to walk with her. You heard. Enough to know I'm disrupting things. He fell into step beside her. Should I try to be more conventional? That would rather defeat the purpose, she said, her harmonics carrying what he now recognized as ironic amusement. The advisory board fears change as all bureaucracies do. They prefer their diversity carefully controlled, properly documented, and thoroughly predicted. Which I'm not. Which you are gloriously not. Tesseria's features arranged themselves into the expression he'd learned meant she was working out a puzzle. Tell me, Nathan, how would you optimize a quantum system that appears to be functioning perfectly? I'd look for patterns in the perfection, he answered without hesitation. Perfect systems often hide stagnation. Sometimes you need to introduce controlled chaos to find new optimization paths. Exactly, she stopped walking, turning to face him. You are our controlled chaos, Nathan. Every protocol you disrupt, every assumption you challenge creates new possibilities. Even this conversation, a properly integrated participant would never have dared eavesdrop on the advisory board. Nathan felt his ceremonial garments shift to a deep blue of embarrassment. Sorry about that. Don't be, your actions demonstrate exactly what I've been trying to explain to the board. True innovation requires breaking patterns to create new ones. She reached out and adjusted his resonance crystal, which he was still holding. There, now it's properly aligned. But it's in exactly the same position as before, Nathan protested. Is it? Tesseria's features arranged themselves into what he now knew was her equivalent of a wink. Or have you simply learned to see the alignment that was already there? As they continued walking, Nathan realized she wasn't just talking about the crystal. Every mistake he'd made, every protocol he'd accidentally broken had been a data point in her larger experiment. She wasn't just studying him, she was using his presence to study her own people's assumptions. The board gave you an ultimatum, didn't they? He asked quietly. They suggested that if you cannot conform to proper protocols within the next station cycle, your contract might need to be adjusted. Her harmonics carried complex overtones he couldn't quite interpret. Fortunately, they failed to specify which protocols or how conformity should be measured. More quantum superposition. Indeed, you're learning to think like a Nexian, she paused, though perhaps we should be learning to think more like you. The gas giant's light caught her crystalline features, creating rainbow refractions that danced across the corridor walls. Nathan watched the patterns, understanding for the first time that he wasn't just a subject in the Preservation Initiative. He was a catalyst for change, whether the advisory board liked it or not. So, he said carefully about that third harmonic progression. Tessaria's features shifted to pleasure. Ah, yes, let me show you how breaking it properly can create entirely new resonance patterns. Behind them, their crystals hummed in perfect discord, creating harmonies that had never existed before. The summons arrived during Nathan's morning quantum meditation session, a practice he'd initially dismissed as spiritual nonsense, but had grown to appreciate for its practical applications in his work. The advisory board required his presence immediately. Alone specified the message, its harmonics carrying unmistakable undertones of authority. Nathan found himself in a circular chamber he'd only glimpsed during his eavesdropping incident. 7 Nexian administrators sat in a crystalline semicircle, their features refracting light in patterns that made his head hurt. Administrator Gerald occupied the central position, his disapproval radiating on multiple quantum frequencies. Nathan Rhodes, Gerald's voice resonated through the chamber. You have been participating in unauthorized modifications to initiative protocols. I wasn't aware I was modifying anything, Nathan replied carefully. I've been learning your ways as requested. You have been learning selectively, another administrator cut in. Director Tessaria's reports indicate you have achieved quantum sensitivity levels that should be impossible without proper genetic integration. Explain. Nathan considered his response carefully. Maybe your assumptions about what's impossible need updating. A ripple of discordant harmonics swept through the chamber. Gerald's features shifted to a pattern Nathan had never seen before. You suggest we abandon 10,000 years of carefully refined protocols because one human shows unexpected aptitude. The harmonics in Gerald's voice could have shattered lesser crystals. I suggest, Nathan said, finding confidence in what Tessaria had taught him, that protocols should serve progress, not limit it. My unexpected aptitude proves your existing models are incomplete. Director Tessaria has corrupted you with her radical theories, Gerald declared. She believes chaos can be controlled, that disorder can generate meaningful patterns. She has violated fundamental principles of the initiative. The initiative exists to preserve and enhance your species, Nathan countered, feeling his ceremonial garments shift through colors of emotion he hadn't even known he could express. But preservation without growth is just stagnation. You dare lecture us on our own principles. Another administrator's features blazed with indignation. I dare suggest that your principles are better than your practices. Nathan held up his resonance crystal, which hummed with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible for a human to generate. Everything you've taught me about quantum states shows that rigid systems eventually collapse. Evolution requires variation. Enough, Gerald stood, his crystalline form towering over Nathan. You will submit to proper genetic integration immediately, or your contract will be terminated. Director Tessaria will face review for her violations. Something in Nathan snapped. Weeks of studying Nexian quantum theory, of learning to see patterns within patterns, crystallized into sudden clarity. You can't, he said quietly. What? You can't terminate my contract or punish Tessaria. Nathan felt a smile spreading across his face. Because we've already achieved integration, just not the way you expected. He held up his crystal again, but this time he pushed his awareness into it the way Tessaria had taught him, letting it amplify and broadcast the quantum patterns he'd learned to perceive. The chamber's ambient resonance shifted, aligning with his crystal's harmonics. The administrators stared as their own crystals began humming in sympathy, creating interference patterns that painted complex equations in the air. Impossible, Gerald whispered. Improbable, Nathan corrected, but definitely real, check your readings. One of the other administrators was already doing so, her features shifting rapidly as she processed the data. He's generating quantum coherence patterns identical to post-integration resonance, but without any genetic modification. Because Tessaria was right, Nathan pressed his advantage. Cognitive evolution can precede genetic integration. She didn't break your protocols, she found a better way to fulfill their purpose. The chamber fell silent except for the harmonious humming of crystals. Nathan held his breath, hoping he'd calculated the quantum political dynamics correctly. The silence was broken by slow, deliberate applause. Tessaria stood in the chamber's entrance, her features radiating more pride than Nathan had ever seen. Excellent demonstration of practical quantum theory application, Nathan, though perhaps a bit dramatic. I learned from the best, he replied, nodding how the administrators shifted uncomfortably. Director Tesseria, Gerald began, but she held up a hand. Before you continue, Administrator, I suggest you examine the pattern matrices Nathan just generated. Pay particular attention to the evolutionary algorithms embedded in the quantum harmonics. The administrators huddled together, their crystals humming as they analyzed the data. Nathan moved to stand beside Tesseria. Your timing is suspiciously perfect, he murmured. Is it? Her features arranged themselves into innocence. How wonderfully unexpected. You knew they'd summon me. I calculated a high probability, she admitted. But your response was entirely your own, that's rather the point. Before Nathan could reply, Gerald turned back to them. His features had rearranged into what might have been grudging respect. The data suggests possibilities we had not considered. He paused, harmonics shifting. Perhaps some protocols could benefit from controlled evolution. What a fascinating hypothesis, Tesseria replied smoothly. I look forward to exploring it in my next report to the Science Council. Nathan caught the subtle emphasis on Science Council, a body that apparently outranked the advisory board, judging by the administrator's reactions. Of course, Gerald conceded, the initiative exists to serve progress after all, within reasonable boundaries. We will, of course, help define those boundaries, Tesseria said. Nathan's insights into quantum cognitive development could revolutionize our understanding of integration theory. As they left the chamber, Nathan felt the tension drain from his shoulders. That was terrifying. But effective, Tesseria's features shifted to amusement. Though I didn't expect you to achieve quantum broadcast harmonics quite so dramatically. Wait, you mean that wasn't supposed to be possible yet? Many things are possible when you don't know they shouldn't be. She gestured toward the research labs. Shall we go document your impossible achievement? I believe it deserves its own protocol classification. Nathan laughed, realizing she'd done it again, turned a potential disaster into an opportunity for progress. As they walked, their crystals hummed in harmony, creating patterns that defied traditional classification. Just like them. Nathan sat cross-legged in his quarters, watching the gas giant storms through the window while his resonance crystal hummed softly. 6 months had passed since his confrontation with the advisory board. In that time, everything and nothing had changed. The door chimed with Tesseria's distinctive pattern. Enter, he called, not moving from his meditation pose. Maintaining quantum coherence while distracted, she noted as she glided in. Impressive progress. I had a good teacher. He opened his eyes to find her studying him with an intensity that would have made him uncomfortable months ago. Now he recognized it as her way of processing multiple layers of information simultaneously. The advisory board has finished reviewing our latest research, she said, settling gracefully onto a cushion across from him. They've approved the new integration protocols. All of them. Even the controversial sections about cognitive evolution preceding genetic modification. Her features shifted in a complex pattern of satisfaction. Though Gerald insisted on adding 17 pages of qualifying statements. Nathan grinned. Let me guess, he's still trying to classify everything I do as acceptable anomalies, rather than admit the old models needed updating. Naturally, Tesseria's crystal harmonized with his, creating intricate patterns in the air between them. Though he did apprentice his youngest researcher to our department yesterday. I noticed she has a fascinating approach to quantum uncertainty principles. Nathan adjusted his crystal's frequency slightly, watching the patterns evolve, though she seems terrified every time I break protocol. Give her time, not everyone adapts to chaos as readily as you do. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their crystal's harmonics paint mathematical poetry in the air. Finally, Tesseria spoke again. The traditional integration ceremony is scheduled for next week. Nathan felt his ceremonial garments shift through several emotional colors before settling. I thought we proved that wasn't necessary. We proved it wasn't necessary for quantum sensitivity development, she corrected. But there are other considerations. Such as the long-term stability of cross-cultural exchange programs, the diplomatic implications of our research, The fact that you've been avoiding this particular conversation for approximately 3 months. Nathan sighed. She wasn't wrong. I've been focused on the work. The work that has revolutionized our understanding of quantum consciousness and genetic expression. Her harmonics carried gentle amusement. The work that proves physical and mental patterns are inexorably linked. That work. When you put it that way, it sounds like I've been contradicting my own research. Wonderfully self-aware, Tessaria's features shifted to what he now recognized as affection. But perhaps there's a third option, one that follows the pattern of everything else we've discovered. Nathan leaned forward, intrigued. What did you have in mind? A new kind of integration ceremony, one that acknowledges what has already naturally developed rather than trying to force traditional patterns. She adjusted her crystal, creating a complex quantum equation in the air. After all, we've proven that the most stable bonds form through organic quantum alignment rather than artificial imposition. Nathan studied the equation, understanding flowing through multiple levels of consciousness. You want to formalize what's already happened rather than try to make it fit old protocols. Exactly, her features brightened. We create a new protocol that honors both traditions while acknowledging that evolution requires flexibility. The advisory board will hate it. The advisory board will be fascinated by the quantum harmony readings we've been recording for the past 6 months. Tessaria's harmonics carried a hint of mischief, particularly the ones showing spontaneous synchronization patterns. Nathan felt his garments shift to a deep blue of embarrassment. You've been documenting that. I am a scientist, she reminded him. All significant phenomena must be properly recorded. And this phenomenon is significant because it demonstrates that true integration cannot be forced or regulated, it can only be recognized and supported. She reached out, adjusting his crystal's alignment slightly. The harmonics shifted, creating a pattern more beautiful than either of them could generate alone. So, Nathan said slowly, we're not so much changing the ceremony as changing what it means. We're acknowledging that meaning evolves just like everything else. Tessaria's features arranged themselves into the expression he'd first seen months ago, the one that suggested she found humor in the universe's endless capacity for surprise. After all, who would have predicted that a human's resistance to traditional protocols would end up improving them? Is that what I did? You showed us that our careful preservation of patterns had become a cage rather than a framework. Her crystal's harmonics shifted to encompass both their resonance frequencies. You taught us that true preservation requires growth, change, and occasionally a complete redistribution of quantum states. Nathan laughed. Now you're just making integration theory sound romantic. Am I? Her features shifted to innocence. How wonderfully unexpected. Outside the window, the gas giant storms continued their eternal dance, mixing chaos and order in patterns that defied prediction yet somehow maintained harmony. Inside, two crystals hummed in perfect resonance, their frequencies neither human nor Nexian, but something entirely new. So, Nathan said finally, about this new ceremony. Oh yes. Can we keep the part where I don't have to wear the formal recognition robes? They keep changing color every time you look at me like that. Tessaria's laughter carried harmonics that made the crystals sing. We'll create a new protocol, one that allows for spontaneous color changes and unexpected quantum alignments. And maybe fewer ceremonial readings of genetic compatibility charts. We could replace them with live demonstrations of quantum coherence patterns, she suggested, her features arranged in what he now knew was her equivalent of a smirk. The advisory board would definitely have opinions about that. The advisory board will have extensive opinions about everything we do, Tessaria reminded him. That's rather the point. Every pattern we break creates opportunity for new growth. Nathan stood, offering her his hand in a very human gesture she had learned to appreciate. Then let's go break some patterns. As they left his quarters, their crystals hummed in harmony, creating mathematics that shouldn't have been possible, much like everything else about their collaboration. But then, impossibility was just another pattern waiting to be broken. The gas giant watched silently. It storms a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful systems are the ones that find their own way to order through chaos, and that the best protocols are the ones that evolve naturally, like the quantum harmonics of two crystals learning to sing together in a new key.